Imagine this. You're sitting cross-legged on a cushion, back straight, eyes closed, breath steady. The scent of sandalwood curls through the air. You've followed every instruction. Focus on the breath. Let thoughts pass like clouds. Anchor yourself in the now. For months, you've carved out 20 minutes daily, chasing the promise of inner peace. But instead of calm, something darker stirs. A voice, faint at first, then deafening. What if this isn't working? What if you're broken? Your chest tightens. The breath you've tried so hard to control quickens, jagged. The stillness you sought becomes a vacuum, sucking every repressed fear, every half-buried memory into the light. This isn't transcendence. This is a trap. Welcome to Mindfulness Meditation's dirty secret. Scientists praise it as a panacea, a cure for anxiety, depression, chronic pain. Corporations sell it as a productivity hack. Instagram influencers peddle it beside crystals and green smoothies. But no one tells you about the shadows. No one warns you that for a significant subset of people, the act of sitting with their thoughts doesn't dissolve suffering. It amplifies it. A 2018 study in PLOS Medicine found that 8% of participants in mindfulness programs experienced worsened anxiety or depression. 8%. Not a rounding error, a fracture in the facade. Here's the great question. What if the very tool we've been sold to silence the mind has become a weapon the mind uses against itself? Consider the paradox. Mindfulness teaches detachment, to observe thoughts without judgment. But what happens when the thought you're observing is, I am failing at observing my thoughts? The act of witnessing becomes a hall of mirrors. Infinite regress. You're not just anxious, you're anxious about being anxious, then guilty for failing to fix it. The practice meant to liberate you becomes a cage, its bars forged from the dogma of self-optimization. Breathe, focus, be better. This is not hypothetical. Talk to the woman who, after 3 months of meditation, began having panic attacks mid-session, flashes of childhood abandonment she'd buried for decades, or the CEO who quit his practice when he realized his mindful breathing was just another form of control, a desperate attempt to outrun the void gnawing at his achievements. These aren't outliers. They're the silenced chorus in a cultural narrative that conflates enlightenment with efficiency. Dig deeper, and the contradiction sharpens. Carl Jung warned of the dangers of spiritual bypassing, using transcendence to avoid confronting the unresolved traumas festering in the white subconscious. Nietzsche scoffed at the ascetic ideal, the lie that self-denial could purify the soul. Yet modern mindfulness, stripped of its Buddhist roots and repackaged as a secular cure-all, demands precisely this. Sit, suppress, optimize. It asks you to treat your mind like a machine, defragment its thoughts, delete its errors while ignoring the rotors of existential dread humming beneath the surface, but the dread persists because you can't meditate away the human condition. Schopenhauer understood this. He saw existence as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom, with fleeting moments of relief. To sit in silence, he might argue, is to stare directly into the abyss of our own futility, to realize that no amount of breathwork will answer the question, why does any of this matter? Yet we're told to persist, to treat the abyss as a technical glitch, breathe through it, label it thinking, return to the mantra. But what if the abyss is the point? This is the rupture no one wants to name. Mindfulness, in its commodified form, has become a spiritual placebo. It soothes the symptoms but leaves the disease untouched. The disease of being a conscious creature in a universe indifferent to your suffering. The more fervently you cling to the practice, the more you reinforce the illusion that peace is something to achieve rather than something to surrender to. You've been handed a lantern to navigate the dark, only to discover the flame is a hologram, And so the great question splits into 1,000 shards. Is mindfulness meditation a lifeline or a labyrinth, a path to clarity or a reflection of our deepest avoidance? The answer lies not in the breath, but in what the breath reveals. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. You don't have a mind, you are a mind. A storm of synapses, an echo chamber of inherited traumas and half-remembered dreams. And when you sit in silence, trying to observe this chaos, you're not stepping outside it. You're dividing yourself into two, the watcher and the watched, the surgeon and the patient, the jailer and the jailed. This is the first lie, the root of the rot. Modern mindfulness, stripped of its ancient ethical framework, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, with its emphasis on compassion and moral clarity, has become a tool of dissociation. It asks you to neuter your emotions, to note your rage or grief as if they were curiosities in a museum. But rage and grief are not artifacts, they're alarms. They're the psyche's immune system, screaming that something is wrong. To silence them under the guise of non-judgment is to perform a psychic lobotomy. Why does this happen? Because the West has weaponized mindfulness against its original purpose. In Buddhism, meditation was never meant to exist in a vacuum. It was one strand in a web of practices designed to uproot dukkha, the profound unsatisfactoriness of existence. But capitalism, with its genius for co-opting rebellion, plucked the lotus from the mud and repackaged it as a productivity app. The goal shifted from liberation to functionality. Don't heal, perform. Carl Jung saw this coming. He wrote of the shadow, the repository of everything we disown, our cruelty, our lust, our primal hungers. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he warned, but by making the darkness conscious. Yet the mindfulness industrial complex sells precisely the opposite, a sterilized, shadowless version of self-awareness. Sit, breathe, and ignore the corpse under the floorboards. The more you meditate to fix yourself, the more you exile the parts of you deemed unworthy. And exiled shadows don't vanish. They gather strength. They riot. Nietzsche's hammer strikes here. He railed against the ascetic ideal, the delusion that self-punishment could purify the soul. Modern mindfulness, with its cult of discipline and its mantra of return to the breath, mirrors this masochism. You're told to endure the itch, the ache, the scream of the body, as if suffering were a virtue. But Nietzsche would ask, who benefits from your silence? The answer is in the boardrooms, the Silicon Valley retreats, the wellness influencers hawking inner peace as a prerequisite for late-stage capitalism. A pacified mind is a compliant mind. Yet the rebellion is inevitable because the human psyche cannot be partitioned forever. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to escape the terror of freedom. When you meditate to quiet your mind, you're engaging in a similar sleight of hand. You're pretending the void isn't staring back, but the void is patient. It waits in the space between breaths, in the milliseconds when the mantra falters. It whispers, you are not your productivity. You are not your positivity. You are a flicker of consciousness on a dying rock. Schopenhauer's ghost haunts this dynamic. He saw the will, the blind, striving force of existence, as the source of all suffering. To sit in meditation, he might argue, is to momentarily paralyze the will, to numb its cravings. But numbness is not peace. It's anesthesia. And when the drug wears off, the will returns hungrier, more ravenous, because you've refused to feed it truth. You've offered it platitudes instead of purpose. Enter Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz and architect of logotherapy. Frankl's central insight was that humans cannot thrive on self-help alone. They need self-transcendence, meaning he argued, is found not in gazing inward but in reaching outward, to love, to create, to suffer for something. Modern mindfulness inverts this. It turns the gaze inward and calls it enlightenment, all while severing the connective tissue between the self and the world. The result? A generation of people who can breathe through a panic attack but can't name why they're panicking, who can sit with discomfort but can't articulate what they truly desire. The neurological trap is equally damning. Studies show that mindfulness quiets the amygdala, the brain's fear center. But this suppression comes at a cost. The default mode network, DMN, the brain's self-referential circuitry, lights up in meditators, amplifying rumination. You're not detaching from the ego, you're hypercharging it. Every session becomes a covert therapy session where the ego, disguised as the observer, tightens its grip. Look how mindful I am, it preens. Look how I rise above. This is spiritual capitalism. The same force that monetizes your attention span now monetizes your attempt to escape it. And beneath it all lies the unspoken truth. We're not anxious because we've forgotten to breathe. We're anxious because we've been gaslit into believing that a life of quiet despair is normal. That the solution to systemic alienation is a 5-minute body scan. Aldous Huxley predicted this in Brave New World, where citizens medicated themselves into placidity with soma. Universal happiness, he wrote, keeps the wheels steadily turning. Modern mindfulness is the soma of the soul. It doesn't cure alienation, it anesthetizes it. It turns the quest for meaning into a checklist. 10 minutes of breathwork, 15 minutes of gratitude journaling, while the world burns. So here we stand, at the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern madness. The problem isn't mindfulness itself. The problem is what we've done to it. We've taken a practice designed to shatter illusions and turned it into the ultimate illusion, a hologram of healing projected onto the walls of our collective cage. The unseen consequences. Picture this. You're at a dinner party. The conversation turns to stress. A colleague boasts about her 10-day silent retreat. Another shares his mindfulness app streak. You mention your panic attacks, the ones that started 3 weeks into daily meditation. The room chills. Eyes dart. Someone coughs. Maybe you're not doing it right. A voice offers. The subtext is clear. Your pain is your fault. You nod, swallow the lie, and order another drink. This is how the unseen consequences metastasize, not in dramatic collapses, but in quiet moments where suffering is gaslit into shame. The personal becomes political, the psychological becomes systemic. A 2018 study found 8% of mindfulness users spiral, 8% of millions. Yet their stories are muffled beneath a cultural obsession with self-optimization. But the damage runs deeper than statistics. It rewires brains, reshapes societies, and births a new kind of existential exile. Let's dissect the rot. The neurological betrayal. You were promised a quieter amygdala, the brain's fear center dampened, threats neutralized. But neuroscience reveals a sinister trade-off. As mindfulness numbs the amygdala, it hypercharges the default mode network, DMN, the circuitry of self-referential thought. Translation: you're not detaching from your ego, you're feeding it premium fuel. Every meditation session becomes a covert echo chamber where the mind chases its own tail. Why am I anxious? Am I meditating wrong? Does everyone else feel this? Empty? The DMN, now a tyrant, spins narratives of inadequacy. The very practice meant to free you becomes a labyrinth of self-surveillance. This is the illusion of control in action, a cognitive bias that convinces you mastery over breath means mastery over life. But when chaos inevitably strikes, a layoff, a breakup, a pandemic, the facade cracks. You white-knuckle the mantra, but the panic drowns it out. The brain, trained to pathologize imperfection, whispers, "You failed." The result? A generation stranded between the guilt of not trying hard enough and the terror of realizing no amount of trying will ever fill the void. The emotional ice age, Schopenhauer, warned that numbing pain numbs joy. Modern mindfulness, with its cult of detachment, risks both. By treating emotions as clouds to observe, you don't transcend them, you sterilize them. Grief becomes a sensation, rage, a vibrational frequency. But emotions are not data points, they're the language of the soul. Consider the CEO from Section 1 who traded panic attacks for emotional ice. He could sit through board meetings unmoved, yet couldn't cry at his father's funeral. This is spiritual bypassing at scale, using mindfulness to amputate the messy, vital parts of being human. Nietzsche's ascetic ideal reborn as a LinkedIn skill. The cost? A society of functional automatons, fluent in breathwork but illiterate in their own hearts. The societal hypnosis, Aldous Huxley's Soma, wasn't a pill, it was a paradigm, a way to pacify dissent by making alienation taste like enlightenment. Today's Soma is the mindfulness industrial complex. Corporations fund meditation rooms. 2. Silence burnout. Schools teach kids to breathe through bullying instead of dismantling hierarchies. The message is clear. Adapt to the machine. Don't question it. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to survive an untenable reality. When you're told to breathe through exploitation, you're not practicing mindfulness, you're practicing complicity. The unseen consequence? A world where oppression is met with chance, where systemic crises are framed as personal failures. Climate anxiety? Try a body scan. Student debt? Journal about gratitude. The meaning? Crisis. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz by clinging to meaning, not self-help. Yet modern mindfulness reduces his legacy to finding purpose in the present. This inversion is catastrophic. By fetishizing the now, we sever ties to past wisdom and future responsibility. The result? A culture unmoored from legacy or legacy building, addicted to the dopamine hit of mindful moments, while the planet fractures. The sunk cost fallacy binds millions to the practice. I've spent years meditating. Stopping would mean I wasted my life. So they double down, mistaking endurance for insight. Meanwhile, confirmation bias cherry-picks good days, ignoring the slow bleed of alienation. The silent rebellion, but the soul is not so easily silenced. In the quiet corners, a counter-movement stirs. The woman who quit meditation to start a protest. The therapist tossing mindfulness workbooks for community grief circles. They sense what Frankl knew. Meaning thrives in communion, not isolation. That rage channeled can dismantle empires. That the void meditation fears is actually the womb of creation, if only we'd stop numbing it. The unseen consequence of our mindfulness obsession is this. It mirrors the very systems it claims to heal. It is capitalism in lotus pose, colonialism with a mantra. Yet, in its shadow, a truth pulses, one that Section 4 will weaponize. The labyrinth has an exit. But first, you must stop worshipping the walls. The rebellion, how to break free. You are not the monk on the mountaintop, you are the heretic burning the temple. The rebellion begins here. Stop trying to fix yourself. This is not nihilism. This is revolt. For decades, you've been sold a lie that inner peace is a private project, a solo pilgrimage of discipline and denial. But what if the cage isn't your mind? What if the cage is the belief that you need to be saved from your mind? The way out isn't through more control. It's through surrender, not to the void, but to the raw, untamed truth of what you are. Let's dismantle the algorithm. Step 1, weaponize your shadows. Carl Jung's shadow work was never about meditation cushions. It was about staring into the abyss until the abyss stares back, and then asking it to dance. Your rage, your lust, your pettiness, these aren't obstacles to enlightenment. They're the path. In 1971, when Angela Davis stood trial for charges that could have meant her execution, she didn't meditate. She leaned into her fury. "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change," she declared. "I am changing the things I cannot accept." This is shadow work in action, channeling the unspiritual into fuel for revolution. Your anxiety isn't a malfunction. It's a compass. It's pointing to what matters. Stop numbing it. Follow it. Step 2. Reject the ascetic. Ideal Nietzsche's Zarathustra didn't descend from the mountain to teach detachment. He came to roar, "Come who you are." The modern mindfulness movement sells austerity, renounce desire, transcend the body, purify the soul. But Nietzsche would laugh at this. Is he not a voluptuary, this saint? He wrote of ascetics. He wants honey, only he calls it God. Rebellion looks like this. Eat the honey. The French existentialists knew this. Simone de Beauvoir didn't journal her way through Nazi-occupied Paris. She wrote The Ethics of Ambiguity in Cafes, Chain Smoking, arguing that freedom isn't found in detachment, but in engagement, with art, with politics, with the mess of living. Replace your meditation timer with a manifesto. Let your practice be the act of devouring life, not rising above it. Step 3. Rewild your attention. Capitalism hijacks attention. Mindfulness trains you to surrender it. The rebellion? Steal it back. In the 1960s, psychiatrist R.D. Laing ran experimental communities for schizophrenics, rejecting the era's cold clinical treatments. Patients painted, howled, smashed plates, not to heal, but to reclaim their agency. Laing's radical insight: madness isn't a problem to solve. It's a language to decipher. Apply this to your mind. When anxiety claws at your chest, don't note it and return to the breath. Interrogate it. What is it defending? What is it demanding? Your attention isn't a resource to manage. It's a lifeline to your unlived life. Follow it into the dark. Step 4. Abandon the guru victor. Frankl survived the camps not by detaching from suffering, but by finding meaning within it. Yet modern mindfulness turns gurus into gods, wellness influencers, app developers, TED Talk prophets. Their message? You're broken. We can fix you. The rebellion is simple. Trust nothing that profits from your pain. In 19th century New England, the transcendentalists Thoreau, Emerson, Fuller rejected organized religion for raw, unfiltered communion with nature. Thoreau didn't go to Walden Pond to find himself. He went to lose the self society had imposed. His journal entry on his first night: "I am freer than ever I knew." Your Walden is wherever dogma dies. Burn the mindfulness workbooks. Cancel the app subscription. Let your practice be the act of refusing to be commodified. Step 5. Embrace existential arson. Jean-Paul Sartre called hell other people. He was half right. Hell is the lie that you need permission to exist. Rebellion is existential arson, torching the scripts, the should, the curated personas. In 1917, the Dadaists stormed Zurich's Cabaret Voltaire, screaming nonsense poetry, banging drums, celebrating chaos as antidote to World War I's mechanized slaughter. They didn't transcend madness, they became it. You don't need a meditation habit, you need a Dadaist heart. When the world demands you breathe through injustice, laugh. When it pathologizes your despair, spit in its eye. Your rage is valid, your grief is holy. Your irreverence is a sacrament, the final threshold. This is not a 5-step plan. It's a Molotov cocktail. The revolution won't be mindful. It will be messy, reckless, alive. It will smell like sweat and soil and the ozone crackle of synapses, firing in uncharted pattern. You will not find peace. You will find power, the kind that terrifies empires, the kind that fuels wildfires and births new galaxies. The labyrinth's exit? It was inside you all along, not in the part that meditates, but in the part that refuses. Nietzsche's Übermensch didn't transcend humanity. He embodied it, fully, fiercely, flaws blazing like a crown. Your task isn't to quiet the storm, it's to become the storm.